Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. It's 1 o'clock, and welcome to our July council meeting. It's July 27th, 2020, and good to see everybody again. First thing is I'll call this meeting to order, and I'll ask our clerk to do our roll call.
Thank you, Mayor Linton. Councillor Kittredge. Councillor Kittredge. Councillor Dunsmore.
Present.
Oh, okay. Councillor Dunsmore.
Present.
Councillor McRae.
Present.
Councillor McElwain. Nope. Councillor Foster. And Councillor Van Leeuwen.
I am present.
Okay.
Hopefully the councillors will join us soon. We do have to go through the roll call, so because even though I can see most of the people on the call, sometimes when there's a couple screens,
okay.
Sure if people are. Okay, so I'll ask if there's any disclosure of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act with any of the agenda items. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. I have a recommendation that the Council of the Township of Center Wellington confirm the agenda for the meeting held July 27th, 2020. Mover for that recommendation, Councillor Dunsmore, seconded by Councillor McRae. All in favor? And that is carried. Moving on to confirmation of minutes, we have minutes from our Committee of the Whole meeting from June the 15th. Recommendation of the minutes of the Committee of the Whole budget meeting held June 15th, 2020 be adopted as circulated. Mover for that recommendation. Councillor Dunsmore, Councillor Van Leeuwen, all in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Moving on to presentations and announcements. First thing on the agenda is my county council report, but before I do that, I'm just going to have one other announcement, a good news story actually. We have another example of a great corporate citizen. Remedy RX is providing the Township of Center Wellington with $50,000 worth of outdoor fitness equipment for Forfar Park. That's really, really good, and thanks very much to Remedy RX for stepping up and doing that. We've had a few companies step up and provide public amenities like this in the past, and this is the most recent example of that. So thanks very much to Rachel Luther from Center Wellington Remedy RX for providing $15,000 in outdoor fitness equipment for Forfar Park. So that's going to be a great addition to that park. That park is going to get some significant improvements, so the timing of that donation is really, really good. So thanks very much to RX Remedy again. So as far as the County Council report, a quick update on the COVID-19. Now that we're in stage 3, the county has started to open up some more of its services and its programs. Wellington County Museum, it's back to its regular hours, so Monday to Friday, 9:30 to 4:30 p.m. Saturday and Sunday from 1 to 5 p.m. Wellington County Libraries, the curbside pickup has proven to be really popular at the county, and there's a lot of people using that, so that's continuing. The libraries are partially open right now, but you can't take books out or materials out yet. But the plan is to have all our libraries fully operational across the 14 locations by August the 10th. So in comparison to a lot of the other counties and municipalities that have library systems, Wellington County Library System is significantly ahead of the other libraries, and they're being asked almost on a daily basis on what we're doing because we're moving ahead quickly. Obviously, there has to be some significant protocol changes for the libraries. Things have to be, every item has to be cleaned before it's put back to the shelf. So there's a significant amount of work that is required by our library team. So as great to have our museum and our libraries back up again. The county isn't opening up its administrative centers to the general public quite yet. I don't feel like we're ready for that. So that's a bit of a COVID update. Last week, Standard & Poor's credit rating agency announced that the County of Wellington has maintained its AA+ credit rating. So this is the 6th year in a row for that credit rating. And they attribute that to the county's operating performance and financial management to remain strong even amid the COVID-19 pandemic. And a few highlights from their reports that speaks to their rationale for a AA credit rating are the following: steady population growth, above average household income, strong and improving financial management practices, stable economy and advantageous location, strong budgetary performance, healthy liquidity position, stable, well-balanced, predictable institutional framework. Budgetary stresses stemming from the pandemic will largely be temporary in nature, and county council and staff demonstrate stable experience and effective leadership. So great to get that vote of confidence in terms of a AA+ credit rating from the county. A bit of an update on the Western Wardens Caucus supporting rural broadband, and as many of you already know, the SWIFT project has been very good for Centre Wellington, and we're one of the first areas that is going to be benefiting from new high-speed connection for both Bellwood, and that's going to be a Cogeco project providing service to Bellwood by the end of 2021. And in addition, Inverhop, Ponsonby, ATEL Networks project, and that should be in place by mid-2021. So that's through the SWIFT project. At our July 2nd meeting of the Western Ontario Wardens Caucus, we approved a series of recommendations to support rural broadband in southwestern Ontario. So we formally request additional funding to SWIFT from the Government of Canada in the amount of $254 million and from the Government of Ontario in the amount of $221 million. So combined with the $174 million commitment from public-private partnerships, the Western Wardens is working hard to address the current $1 billion infrastructure deficit across southwestern Ontario to achieve the goal of providing 50/10 broadband services to 95% of the population within the region by 2025. So a significant amount of money is being invested, and so we're lobbying both the province and the federal government through the Western Wardens Caucus to ensure that southwestern Ontario receives a share of the money that both the federal government and the province have committed to. So that's good news. And as we get more information on either SWIFT or additional projects that are coming out when it comes to high-speed internet, I'll make sure that I keep council informed of that. And that's my report for the county council. Moving on to 5.2, we have a presentation from Wayne Dyce, President of Centre Wellington Hydro, regarding the 2019 annual report and audited financial statements. So I'm going to ask Wayne if he could come to the podium and give an overview of your presentation. Welcome, Wayne.
Hello, everyone. I trust that everyone can hear me okay. I've been in my fair share of Zoom meetings like everyone else, and went on talking only to realize that my mic was muted and all of it wasted. So, all right. Well, thank you very much, Your Worship and council members, for having me join you today and addressing you all. I won't take up too much of your time. Just to recap a few highlights from the 2019 annual report, or I guess introduce the 2019 annual report, which I trust you had an opportunity to read. 2019 was certainly a busy year on all accounts for the team at Centre Wellington Hydro. From our customer service folks providing knowledgeable help to customers and getting the bills out and dealing with settlement of electricity that flows from other entities through CW Hydro's system to our customers, and the operations staff keeping the lights on, as they say, and we've been busy with capital projects and maintenance of the system, of course, and all the active residential and commercial infield projects going on around the community. And of course, the major Fergus MS2 station transformer replacement highlighted in the written report. You'll see statistics of phone calls, account setups, and other related customer interactions, as well as key performance indicators that are derived from the reporting and record keeping requirements that we perform for the Ontario Energy Board, or as we refer to them as triple Rs. And there are operation stats on assets and, again, triple Rs that feed into those KPIs that show the reliability of our distribution system and the quality of our customer service. It's kind of it's the proof that we're managing the system and replacing assets prudently and in a financially responsible way. And we don't want to forget about the people behind the scenes in finance and regulatory that keep us on the straight and narrow. As can be seen by the financial report, 2019 was a solid year for CW Hydro, and with some highlights being a net income of $533,000 and reinvestment into our system of just under $2 million, and the increased shareholder equity of $365,000. And maybe also important to note is our community involvement, both financially and within kind work that we do. On that note, 2020 will see CW Hydro helping out with a couple of community projects, one of which is the expansion to the Sportsplex electrical servicing, which we've been working with the township and community groups on that one. And we're also going to be installing an electric vehicle charger in Fergus behind the tourism building, the old Wayscales, that parking lot on the corner of Provost Lane and St. Patrick Street. So we'll be busy with those projects and looking forward to getting them started soon. You have been provided with the complete audited financials for Central Wellington Hydro, which, as per our shareholder direction, we have reviewed these with the Township Financial Department. And maybe just shine a light on one item in the annual report. Just that special thank you to Keith Rosell, who's been involved with Central Wellington Hydro for many decades, going back almost continuously to the early 1950s. It has truly been my sincere pleasure to have known and worked with Keith for all these years. Keith's passion is people, and he took an interest in all employees and made time for everyone, regardless of their position or department. So all his service over the years is certainly appreciated, and that's an understatement, of course. Maybe before I take any questions, I will mention a couple more things that are more current items. Like everyone else, we've been affected by COVID-19 pandemic, and to start it really challenged our business continuity plan, and we had to adjust to staff working from home and introduce new policies and procedures to deal with the changing health and safety risks and customer interactions remotely. But as Churchill coined it, never let a good crisis go to waste. So we have been able to make some positive changes and improve our efficiencies in accounts receivable and payable, in producing our bills and electronic settlement functions. So it has been challenging, but we continue to serve our customers with the same high quality as ever throughout it all. And we have been participating in the municipality's emergency management committee meetings, which has kept the lines of communications open. And it's also just helped us keep up to speed with all the changes from the municipality and at the county level as well, and in some cases right up to the province. So we're thankful for the assistance there. And another fairly recent change, CW Hydro's transition to using the township's IT department to manage all of our communications and IT needs, from hardware, including workstations and servers and switches and firewalls and all that good stuff, to software applications. But most importantly is the cybersecurity. As everyone knows, municipalities and private industry alike are dealing with a heightened cyber-related risks, and having the township's IT department manage this for CW Hydro is proving to be a great strategic decision. And the timing couldn't be better, actually, because the tremendous service that we've been receiving from them is what really made it possible for our staff to work from home almost immediately when the pandemic started. So we're very thankful for that as well. And so that really wraps up the highlights. And again, I'm really just introducing the 2019 report, but I am happy to take any questions that anyone might have.
Thanks very much, Wayne. It's good to hear that Central Wellington Hydro is doing some good work for Central Wellington. Our technology group is doing good work for Hydro, so no surprise there. And thanks to Keith Roselle for the many, many years of dedicated service to CW Hydro before then. So appreciate that. Questions from council for Wayne? Okay, Wayne, it looks like you're off the hook. Thanks very much for coming and presenting to us. And you can stick around, obviously, but feel free to leave when you have to. Thanks for coming.
Very much, everyone.
Moving on to a presentation by Matthew Betik, Kpmg, our audited financial statements. And I will turn it over to Mark first and to introduce Kpmg. Mark?
Thank you, Marilyn. Matt Betik from Kpmg will give you a quick run through of their Kpmg audit findings report, and then when he's done his run through of that report, I'll then take you through the financial statements briefly and answer any questions that you might have. So, Matt, if you want to take over.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Carrie, do you want me to share my screen to walk through the presentation?
Is it in everybody's package anyway?
It is in the agenda materials, yes.
Yeah, so why don't we, it gets complicated because we can't see things anymore. Everybody can turn to that page.
Starts on page 73 of the agenda material document.
And then we'll do it that way.
Sure thing. And so I'll provide the page numbers as we scroll along.
Perfect.
Okay, so great. So we're on page 73 of 303 of your agenda materials, which is the cover page. And I'll take a few minutes just to hit the highlights of the report. Obviously, I won't go through it in great detail, but certainly we'll have some time for questions at the end. Before I really get into the heart of it, wanted to communicate to council that we started our audit field work on the 30th of March, which was shortly after some of the significant shutdowns happened, and many people were working from home, and KPMG continues to operate in a work remotely environment. So for the first time ever with the township, we conducted our audit 100% from home, and would like to thank the staff here for adapting to that, and I would say adapting to that very well. None of us ever contemplated anything like this in how we do our work. We're already set up to do and share things digitally, so that was helpful. But certainly the response by township staff was really strong. So kudos there for sure. As we move through the report onto page 75, which presents our executive summary. I want to touch on two things here. On that page, in the far right-hand side column, finalizing the audit, just want to say that we've completed the process of legal confirmation, so that was outstanding when we produced this report. And then once we get council's approval of the statements and some other fairly perfunctory correspondence between ourselves and and Dan and Mark, we are ready to go with the financial statements. Secondly, right below that under COVID-19, certainly there is some impact of this to every organization, the township included. Included in the notes of the financial statements, there is, acknowledgement of this. But at this point, it's still uncertain as to what the full extent of the impact is going to be. As we move on to page 77, we just show the financial statement summary, and I know Mark is going to go through several items here, so I won't dive terribly deep into here, but wanted to point out in the bottom part of this slide that the township's financial statements include these other entities which we have identified. So the two business improvement areas in Fergus and Elora, as well as the township's investment in Center Wellington Energy, which includes hydro and energy innovations, as well as the communications entity. As I move into page 78, we are required as part of our audit to consider and communicate with this group our results from the risk of fraud in the audit. And I've mentioned before to this group, when we're talking about fraud risk, we're talking about the risk of intentional manipulation of the accounting records or the financial statements to achieve some type of nefarious purpose. Despite all the words on the page, we believe this is very low risk, and of all of our steps that we undertook, we have no findings whatsoever. Moving on to page 79, we provide some details around some of the employee future benefits that the township has. So these are two primary ones where we've got post-employment benefits. So that is health and dental benefits that are provided to those that meet certain criteria and are early retiring. So certain employees who retire before the age of 65 but have a certain service with the township will continue to have health and dental benefits until they turn 65, as well as the township's liability for WSIB payments. And so we see some of the data here. We do rely on Nexus Actuarial Consultants, which is an entity hired by the township in the assistance in calculating these, and everything there checked out perfectly. As I move through the other sections of the file, these are fairly consistent with things that I've talked about before. So we do spend a fair amount of time on payroll and taxation revenue. This is on page 80. Payroll is obviously your largest class of transactions within the municipality, and our work there is primarily around testing the controls around the payroll process, as well as looking at headcount analysis, salary change analysis, and rolling all that up and confirming that the amounts recorded in the statements do make sense. As I can skip over a couple of pages onto page 82, where we have some charts around capital assets. I think the interesting point here is we see in the two pie graphs below the 2018 and 2019, these are capital additions, whether they be treated as expenses or whether they've been added to the balance sheet. And what's obvious is that in 2019, there was very little contributed capital. So these are assets that are contributed to the municipality for a variety of reasons, but the most common is through developments, right, where a developer may build and construct certain infrastructure, and then that gets sort of contributed back over to the township. There was less activity on that contribution in 19 compared to 18, which is quite normal. This can be very volatile. But what it does mean is when those assets are contributed, they show up as revenue to the township. And so this year we have less revenue from contributed assets than we would have last year. This is a non-cash revenue, but it does have the impact of making the surplus in the current year appear a little bit lower. The final slide that I will touch on is on page 85, where we disclosed that there were no differences that were identified that were either corrected in the statements or remain uncorrected. So this is a good news story, along with the audit opinion, which we're prepared to issue, which is a clean audit opinion with no qualifications or modifications. So that just means that the information that we were provided to did not have to be adjusted before rolling up into the draft statements that are in your agenda materials. So with that, I'll close the formal comments and just say, thanks to Dan and Mark and the rest of their team in helping us get across the finish line this year. So back over to the mayor, I think.
Great. Thank you very much, Matt. Anything that you wanted to add to that, Mark or Dan?
I have nothing to add, although I can go through my report at this point in time.
Yeah, that's a great idea. If you could have nothing to add to Matthew's presentation, if you can go through your report, that'd be great.
Okay, so like Matt did, I'll refer to the page numbers that are in the PDF file of the agenda. So page 133 is where my report begins. So basically this report just summarizes the purpose of each statement in the financial statements. It highlights some of the major variances. Attachment A that's attached to is the audited financial statements. Attachment B reconciles the 2019 operating fund surplus of about $783,000. So that was a report that was brought forward to council, I believe, back in June, or it might have been May.
Mark, just hold for a second. Is everybody tracking? Councilor Van Leeuwen, you have a question. I'm just wondering if everybody's tracking with the page numbers.
Yeah, I'm actually having some difficulty with getting those pages. They seem to show differently on my screen, the page numbers. And so I am finding if it takes a lot of work for me to run all around and then go, okay, where am I at when we open a report?
Okay, so maybe you can just, Mark, if you could go through it and share your screen. I know it's, that might be a better way to do it.
Yeah, I actually don't have it on my screen. I'm working off of hard copies that I wrote the page numbers on.
Give Devlin a minute to find it.
Yeah, so definitely you could find the report and bring it up.
I'm probably only going to touch on about 3-4 pages tops. So,
well, you add a few pages so it's worth their while, Mark.
Okay.
Just kidding.
In our agenda, if we click on the statements there, is it not there? Like
I did. That's why I was trying to do it that way.
Yeah, I got like 33 pages, and then I get another one, but I'm not seeing 130 and.
Yeah, the problem is the PDF and iCompass have different numbering patterns, so that's what we're dealing with.
Yeah, if you could say it in 2 different ways, I'm good.
Okay. Yeah. I see what's going on here. So, for those that are in the HTML, if you click on the core 2020-42 PDF link, which should be page 133 in the PDF, or what Terry has on screen now. So essentially, attachment A is the audited financial statements. Attachment B reconciles the 2019 operating fund surplus of $783,000 with a $6.5 million surplus in the consolidated statement of operations. So now if everybody goes to the financial statements, once I go through those, it should cover off everything in my report. So the financial statements begin on page 137, or click on that link for those that are in the HTML. Okay, so Carrie, if you can go down a few pages to page 139, it'll have page 2 on the bottom of it. Okay, so this is the consolidated statement of financial position. So this is the equivalent of the private sector's balance sheet. Split into kind of 3 areas: financial assets, financial liabilities, and non-financial assets. So financial assets are those that the township owns. Financial liabilities are those that it owes. And the non-financial assets are those assets that are held for provision of future services at a fixed point in time. And that fixed point in time is the township's year end, which was December 31st, 2019. So the total financial assets of December 31st were just shy of 81 million. Financial liabilities were about 50.2 million. And the non-financial assets, which the majority of them are our tangible capital assets, or our roads, our water and sewer pipes, and our buildings. The total non-financial assets were about 231 million. And the accumulated surplus, which essentially is the sum of the non-financial assets and the net financial assets, is about 262 million. So there are a couple of variances there I'll touch on. The accounts receivable balance has gone down about $2 million, 2.3 million actually. The main reason for that is at the 2018 year end, there was about $2 million due from two grant programs, the Connecting Link grant program and the CWWF grant program, and we received both of those amounts in 2019. On the financial liabilities side, the biggest increase there is in the deferred revenue, and that's due to an increase in the development charge reserve balance of about 2.6 million. The building code reserve fund also went up about 550 million. We had an additional 1.1 million in builder deposits, and the gas tax reserve fund was up about 900,000. Note 6 in the financial statements details out all of those balances. And the other item that Matt Betik also touched on was the employee future benefits. And you see there's a big increase there of close to $1 million. Main reason for that is we rely on Nexus actuaries to do our WSIB actuarial estimate. And that estimate has gone up significantly in 2019, and that is due to presumptive firefighter claims. We've had a few of them over the past few years. We also had a survivor claim in 2019, and actuaries basically work off of history. They use history to predict future liabilities, and as a result of that actuarial update, the WSIB estimate has gone up $900,000. I think that's probably all I'll touch on here on this page, except I'll just mention the accumulated surplus. One thing to note, this is not funds available for spending, as $230 million of that value is for tangible capital assets. And tangible capital assets are not available to discharge existing liabilities. They're held for the purpose of providing future services. All right. So Carrie, if you can go to the next page, please. So next page is the consolidated statement of operations. I should mention the budget column there, the far left column with numbers in it. Under expenses, that does not include amortization estimates. You'll recall at budget time every year, we pass a provision under Ontario Regulation 28409 that excludes amortization from the calculation of our tax levy. As such, we can't include that amortization in the budget columns there. So that's why the budget for most categories is significantly less than the actual amount for expenses. So total revenues, again, I'm going to be looking at the middle column now, which is the actual 2019. Total revenues about 43.6 million. Total expenses were about 37 million. Take the net of that, you get the annual surplus of 6.5 million. And you add to that the accumulated surplus at the beginning of the year of 255.5 million. You'll get the accumulated surplus that was on the statement of financial position of about 262 million. Again, do not confuse that 6.5 million with the operating fund surplus of 780,000 for 2019 that was reported to council earlier. I have provided a reconciliation between those two numbers as attachment B. Couple of items just to touch on here where there's some significant variances. You'll see the development charges earned are down significantly from the year before, from 6.4 million down to just shy of 2 million. In 2018, there was about 3.6 million for two subdivisions of DCs that were earned. And there was also a number of studies, I believe, in 2018 as well, where they were funded from development charges as well. The fees, rents, and the developer contributions further down under revenue. Matt also touched on this. You'll see it's gone down from 4.15 million to 2.51 million this year. That's because the 2018 amount includes a significant amount of assets assumed for two subdivisions in 2018. I think it was actually $3.7 million of assets were assumed in that year. I think that's all I was going to touch on this page. If you want to go to the next page, Carrie, I'll just quickly go over it. Consolidated statement of net financial assets. This is just a statement that provides additional information related to the non-financial assets of the township. It shows acquisition of tangible capital assets in the year and usage of the capital assets through amortization expense in the year. Can I go to the next page, Carrie, please? And the last formal statement is the consolidated statement of cash flows. So this statement reports the uses and sources of cash for the year. It's broken into 4 categories, and they're operating activities, capital activities, investing activities, and financing activities. So the net change in the cash position for the year was about 7.4 million. You add to that the cash position at the beginning of the year, about 27.8 million. And you have a cash position at the end of the year of about 35.3 million, which ties back into the cash balance that's on the statement of financial position. So the rest of the pages are basically all notes to the financial statements, and you may have seen as we're going through there, there's references to various notes. The notes begin on page 143 or page 6 in this document, or if Gary goes to the next page, that's where the notes start. And they just provide details on the accounting policies used to derive the financial statements and additional disclosures on certain items that are included in the body of the financial statements as well. So I don't know if anybody has any questions. That was a very quick run through. So back to you, Marilyn.
Thanks very much, Mark, for that, those highlights and that detail. Okay, now we got the screen back here. So I'm going to turn it over for questions from council. I'm going to go around the room like we do and see if you have any questions. If you don't have any questions, fine. We'll just go on to the next person. But again, these are for anything related to the audit or Mark's financial statement. And I will start with Councillor Foster.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. I have 3 questions, actually. First question is for Pat Newsom. Pat, I see on the statement just presented, in 2019, we budgeted, going from that screenshot, 5.5 million in budgeted expenses. They came in, I think, at 7.2. Maybe you can refresh that screen for us, Dan, for Mark. I think I've got those numbers correct. Nevertheless, that's a pretty significant variance. How did we budget at 5.5 million and for expenses in 2019 and come in at 7.2? That's a pretty big variance.
I think, Mark, do you want to respond to that first? Mark?
Yeah, and thank you, Marilyn. In this case, I'm probably going to be the one that'll have to answer any questions related to these statements because there's a number of things that are happening behind the scenes here. For instance, your PSAB statements that you're looking at right now, these are the operating fund, the capital fund, and any activity in the reserves all consolidated into one. Pat would be able to answer any questions related to the operating fund, which was presented a month or so ago. But she probably isn't aware of capital items that, like capital fund or capital project items that have been expensed. So a good example of a capital fund project that would be expensed would be any studies. For 99% of the time, studies are all expensed. They may cost $500,000, but they're going to end up hitting the statement of operations. In our internal statements that were provided to council quarterly with a very detailed analysis at year end, You're just seeing the operating fund and capital funds separately. So I can attempt to answer this, but again, there's a mountain of paper behind me that backs up these numbers. So one thing that I mentioned earlier that's missing in that budget number for rec and culture services of 5.7 million is 852,000 of amortization, which again, we exclude that in our budget through OREG 284, excuse me, 19, which as far as I know, every municipality in Ontario does that. So you need to add 852,000 of that. There's also some significant capital projects that off the top of my head I'm aware of. One is the McDonald funding for, it was the Community Foundation. There was a significant amount of McDonald money that was given to the Community Foundation. And that funding needs to go under one of these expense areas, and it fit for the most part under cultural services. So that's why that's blended in there. There's also funding that was given to the Elora Center for the Arts in the capital budget that was significant. I think it was 100,000 in 2019 as well. The other piece I can think of is the actuarial estimate. You recall I mentioned it gone up about, I think it was $900,000. Well, that gets dispersed amongst a number of departments, and Parks and Rec, or that Rec and Culture line, was hit with 208,000 of that. So hopefully that helps explain some of the variance. Again, I can get back to you with a very detailed analysis. That would take some time to pull together, but off the top of my head there, I've probably pulled together well over $1.5 million anyways, probably closer to 2 million. Actually, I'd probably account for most of it.
Mark, do we not budget in the budget figure 5.7? Does it not include amortization and the PBO on the benefit side?
No, it doesn't, because OREG 284-19 excludes us from including that in the budget. We've been doing that ever since TCA accountings occurred in 2008, I think was the first year.
Second question, Councillor Foster.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to skip my, can you hear me okay? There we go. My second question is similar to my first, same basic question. And I think I'm going to skip it because it's probably the same answer, but it referred to transportation. Going from memory on the screenshots, it was, we budgeted about 5.5 million and the expenses came in at 10 million. Again, a significant variance. Maybe you want to speak to that as well, Mark? I think I already know the answer, though.
Mark?
Yeah, and if you include amortization allowance, the actual amortization came out to about 4.71 million. If you add that to the 5.4 million that is in the budget column, you get pretty darn close to the actual amount for 2019. And I know one item that'll be creating a bit of a variance in there will be the railroad upgrade capital project that was done. There was we didn't capitalize any of that. That was seen more as like maintenance gravel put on.
Yeah.
And I think it was $400,000 if I remember correctly.
Councillor Foster, third question.
Thank you, Mayor. Third question. I note in the figures we have accumulated debt of approximately 21 million, and when you net out the accumulated surplus, it's 22 million. So the cash position, 22 million, and the total debt is 21 million. Mark, how is that reflected in the overall financial picture there? Those are important numbers that I think need to be highlighted. The cash position versus the accumulated long-term debt.
Sure, I'm not sure how to answer that question other than, or you just asked me to state the cash balance at December 31st was about 35 million. We had short-term investments, which for the most part are one-year GICs that we have of about 23 million. So, you know, we've got a total cash position, including short-term investments, about 58 million. And we do have long-term liabilities, which were locked into repayment plans until they mature of about $20.7 million. Is that all that you're asking? Just to highlight the balances?
It's important, I think it's important to note that you have the cash position, but you also have a significant long-term liability. So we have to consider both when looking at the overall financial position of the municipality.
Thanks, Councillor Foster. Councillor Van Leeuwen?
Sorry, nothing at this time, thanks. It's interesting to see how when you get into audited statements, there's so much work in the background that moves it around and how they assess it. And I see our, wouldn't be a question more, is that our net financial assets at the end of the year actually went up, which is a good thing for 2019. We should see our assets go up each year. Thanks.
Councillor McElwain?
I have no questions at all for this one. Thanks.
Councillor Kitchers?
I have two questions. One is for Mark, and the other one is for Matthew. The first one for Mark is on page 145. It has the accounting policies and the tangible assets. And when it talks about the useful life, what exactly is the useful life for each item? It's so broad here where they have like 20 to 60 years, 3 to 15 years for equipment. Is there a policy for each item of asset like that you would be using? Like vehicles would be 10 years or 7 years, or like, because this whole variance doesn't really tell us anything. Like, it's so broad. So that was my first question. Maybe you could answer that, then I'll ask the other one.
Yeah, Mark?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there is a whole tangible capital assets policy we have that was put through council, again, back when PSAB was introduced in 2007 or 8. And we've been updating that policy as we go along as there's a new category of asset. But you're bang on. We have a number of different categories that are in behind this. So this is just finance statements are meant to be very high level consolidated statements. If you need to know, a more detailed breakdown, I can send you our TCA policy. It's a really exciting read, but there is actually a summary page at the back of it. It's probably a couple pages, I think, that breaks it down in more detail. So vehicles is a good example. It's got 6 to 20 years. Well, we'll have different categories for vehicles for like fire trucks. The big vehicles probably are the 20 years. The 6-year amortization might be for smaller vehicles. And things that would fall somewhere in between, like a snowplow or something, they might be 12 years, heavy type vehicles. So that's why you're getting a bit of a range there. And you'll get a huge range on equipment. The 3 years, I believe, rolled into equipment is our software and computer hardware. Whereas 15 years, you might be, what could be in there is playground equipment. Okay, so it's very high level within this note, but there is a tangible capital asset policy, which Kpmg has, that rolls into this note.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Kitchers?
It does, but I have a follow-up on that question.
Sure, go ahead.
And what it is I would like to see that, and I would like to know when we add assets to our asset plan, do we rate them as we add them to the plan? Is that when we rate them, like the number of years and stuff like that? Or do we do it like each year we sort of reevaluate it? That's my follow-up on that question.
Okay, I'll take a stab at this because you're almost crossing over into the asset management plan at this point. But what we do is we take our capital fund at the end of the year. We take all those capital projects that we report quarterly on, and we analyze them one by one. And they can basically be three things. They can either be a capital item or a tangible capital asset, or an expense in the case of studies, or they can be work in progress, which essentially means that like a bridge would be a good example, where we start a bridge in 1 year and finish it the next. So it's in progress at the end of the year. It's not available for service, but it will become a tangible capital asset when it's completed and put into service. In terms of, is it rated each year? Well, when we analyze that capital fund at the end of the year, if it's determined to be capital, then we then look to our TCA policy that has the breakdown. So if it's playground equipment has 15 years or whatever it is in the policy, and that's how it'll be set up in our accounting software, and it'll be amortized or depreciated over 15 years. And however vehicles are broken down, it'll be the same thing. We'll look at, okay, it's a fire truck. Fire trucks per the TCA policy is 20 years. It'll then be put in the accounting system as 20 years. Okay?
Yes. Can I ask my other question from Matthew?
Yeah, go ahead, Councilor Kitchus.
Thank you for your report. It was very thorough. And I was interested in your comments about the coronavirus, that you did it all digitally. And this is kind of like a broad question, but you have experience with other municipalities and businesses and all sorts of, and I'm wondering, with the coronavirus, with this more remote, like forced remote working, I noticed that in private enterprise, they're moving towards more remote. Do you see that as a potential for municipalities and government generally? That's a
So
problem.
just to clarify the question, are you seeing the trend in your employee base being a more remote working employee base?
Yes, I not for me because I manufacture, but
Right.
my office staff is definitely remote.
Yeah, so what we're seeing amongst municipalities and for-profit companies alike is when this all started, there was a bit of shock and awe, but I think quickly it became evident that there were many things that could be done remotely. And I would say if you were to talk to a lot of managers and leaders, I would say sort of in the May to June period, a lot of people were saying, yeah, we could do this remote thing. You had some announcements of companies saying, well, we're going to significantly curtail our real estate footprint. We're going to shut down offices. But I would say even from our own experience, I think maybe that was overreaching a bit. And I think we're going to see a more return to the office because of many of the benefits that come through working side by side, the casual hallway interactions, training, coaching, and mentoring, which are all very difficult to do in a remote environment. So if I look out a year or two from now, under the presumption that so the medical side and the health side of this is under control, I think we will come back to a lot closer to what we had pre-pandemic, but maybe not all the way there. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Councilor Dunsmore.
I have no questions. I just want to say thank you, Matthew, to you and your team. It was a very thorough report. Appreciate your effort.
You're welcome.
Councilor McCray.
Thank you, Marilyn. I don't have any questions to ask. Again,
appreciate the report and quite thorough. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Council. And I have a recommendation here that the Council of the Township of Center Wellington approve the December 31st, 2019 audited draft consolidated financial statements as presented by Kpmg LLP Chartered Professional Accountants. Mover for that recommendation, Councilor Dunsmore, seconded by Councilor Foster. All in favor? And that is carried. Again, thanks very much, Matthew, and thanks to you and your team. Thanks, Mark and Dan and your team for pulling this together. Moving on to delegations, and we have one delegation related to Termite. So we need to give our clerk a couple of minutes to get everybody on that needs to be on. So let's pause the meeting for 2 minutes, and we'll let Carrie do her thing and get the folks on that need to be on for the next portion of our agenda.
Hello? Okay, I think we have everybody here, so we'll move on to the next section, and this is talking about termites, and we have delegation, Tammy Rutherford. Welcome, Tammy. You can go ahead and do your delegation. You have 10 minutes to do the delegation. Don't feel like you have to take the full 10 minutes if you don't want to, but you have 10 minutes, so appreciate you being here today. And you just have to unmute yourself. There should be a little mute button at the top of your window, and just click that off. There you go.
Now you can hear me?
We can hear you.
Terrific. Thank you. Mayor Linton and members of council, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to give a brief summary of my experience as a homeowner battling a termite invasion. I moved into my Century Stone home in Fergus 22 years ago. I do not recall any conversation in regard to termites, and in fact, I still have the paperwork from my home inspection, and there's no mention of termites at all. I am now aware that there were termites not too far from my home, so perhaps my experience is really a testament to how quickly termites can spread in a community. Fast forward 12 years, and imagine, I was moving a stack of books from my lovely deep windowsills, and to great surprise, my introduction to termites. Not only had they chewed entirely through the wood sill, they were starting to devour the book at the bottom of that stack. What are these? And what do I do? I talked to neighbors. I asked various people in our community, and I even spoke with the township. This is when I learned that termites are very much a skeleton in the closet in Central Wellington. This way of thinking needs to change. Builders need to show accountability in their designs and implement plans to prevent termite invasion, such as the planned development on South River Road, because this is not just an old home problem. Homeowners should know that there is a plan in place and that they can confidently seek assistance rather than being concerned that if indeed they do speak out, it could simply backfire and really just affect the real estate value of their homes. Real estate agents shouldn't have to keep a dirty little secret just to make a sale. This may sound cruel, but surely there must be a lot of blind eyes turned. 2010 was when I had my first termite treatment. Using methods of drilling into the foundation on the inside and rotting the soil on the outside of my home, a temporary chemical barrier was created around the entire perimeter of my house. This came with a limited guarantee and the hope that it could last longer. My second treatment was 4 years after that, and my third, just another 2 years after that. And again, my fourth, only another 2 years later. Since then, I have had 3 spot treatments, and I'm currently in the process of preparing for yet another full treatment. To date, I have spent $15,633.70 on termite treatments alone. This does not include the cost of repairs. Coincidentally, I have a brother who lives in a termite zone in the city of Guelph, and it is impressive to witness the leadership and the success that city has achieved with their termite management program. I am encouraged that the Township of Centre Wellington during the month of August may be undertaking a survey of properties to determine the extent of current termite infestation. So now, I ask that please, future capital expenses regarding termite management is made a priority when planning the 2021 budget, so that we can fight this invasion together as a community. Because is our community ready for future development when we can't even protect the buildings and the investors that are already here? Thank you for your time.
Thanks very much, Tammy, for that presentation. And I'm going to ask Council if there's any questions for clarification from Tammy. We do have a report for our Managing Director of Planning In addition, we have Dr. Miles here, so we will be having a fulsome discussion about this. But if there's any specific clarifying questions for Tammy, I'd like now's the chance for Council to ask them. Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question for Tammy. Tammy, can you tell us anecdotally? You mentioned talking to your neighbors. Can you tell us anecdotally about your neighborhood and how many of your neighbors' homes and so on? If you just travel around your corner of Fergus, how many homes do you think are impacted around Garifraxa Prairie Street area? Just in broad strokes, Tammy.
You just have to unmute, Tammy. You just have to unmute. There you go.
Okay. Termites is very much an issue that people are reluctant to talk about. So many people will say they don't have a problem, and that's not the case. And partly because they are afraid of the real estate value being affected of their homes. And I really don't want to be pointing any fingers at people, but I have access to the last termite management map that was available, and there are hundreds of homes in both Fergus and Elora that are in this zone, and surely many of those are affected by termites. I mean, they're spreading, so the problem is only getting worse, which is why I would like the community to support a community-wide solution.
Thanks, Tammy. Any other questions for Tammy? Okay, thank you very much and for your presentation. Now we're going to turn it over to our Managing Director of Planning, Brett Salmon. Brett.
Thank you, Mayor Linton. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Good. Okay. Well, my staff report is at the request of council from a notice of motion that was discussed back in February. And since that time, we have been engaged with Dr. Tim Miles. He is formerly an entomologist with the professor at the U of T. And in 2007, he was hired full-time to be a termite control officer with the city of Guelph. So some of the things in my report that are historical in nature talk about the sort of transfer of termites from southwestern Ontario in the Windsor-Essex area through to about 30 municipalities now by the 1970s had termites. And Fergus and Elora are among them, Guelph, Woolwich in Elmira, and in the city of Toronto. For a period of time in the 70s through to the 90s, the provincial government gave a little bit of help to municipalities in terms of offering financial assistance to homeowners who had to treat for termites. And so a program like that gave us the ability, because the township or the municipalities that administered it gave us a pretty good indication of the extent of the termite problem, because people would want to get provincial government money, so they would apply through the local municipality to get reimbursed for some of the costs. So our termite management maps and whatnot that originally were developed were based on the information that we got from the data from those provincial programs, and unfortunately they were wound down in the mid-90s and not been resurrected. So it's been a little bit hit or miss where we get information about new termites since then. So when we engaged with Dr. Miles after the February council meeting, he recommended kind of a two-step approach, where the first thing that we need to do is do a survey of the neighborhoods in Fergus and Elora that are in the generally known termite areas, and survey those properties for termite activity to give us a better handle of the extent of the problem today. So if you look at our termite maps that were last updated in about 2015 that we made public. Those are being divided into 5 or 6 areas, and Dr. Miles will, over August and early September, survey those neighborhoods in a progressive fashion, and through that work will be able to give us a better idea of the extent of termite infestation, and will then be able to give us some estimates that we can use for budget purposes going forward. So the first step is really to know the extent of the problem. And Ms. Rutherford is correct. I mean, the one thing that we do find is people don't want to talk about termites, really. They don't, they're not quick to share with the municipality that have termites. So the best way to go out there is to use Dr. Miles to go out and do that survey work. But the city of Guelph has had success in reducing the numbers and the extent of the termite population in general. And through Dr. Miles' work, it suggested that if your infestation area is rather limited, then it is viable to reduce their numbers. But once they get to large numbers and become so widespread, then it gets more difficult to manage them in an organized way. He does work for, as I said, he's done work with the city of Guelph as a full-time employee. He's now part-time. And he also does work for Woolwich and Kitchener have used his services as well. But obviously the big success has been in the city of Guelph. So we're keen to get started. We can fund that through our operating budget and get that initial work done. But in future years, we will need additional funding in capital for to continue with a management program. That's it.
Great. Thanks very much, Brett. And now I will turn things over to Dr. Miles. Welcome, Dr. Miles. You just have to unmute yourself first. We still can't hear you. Can you? There we go.
Okay. Can you hear? Tammy, thank you for an excellent presentation. I couldn't have done better myself. Very good case for what needs to happen. Hello, Councillor McElwain. I know we've been in discussions before, and it's nice to see you again. Thank you, Brett, for a very good overview. I'm sure we can be very successful. We have been successful everywhere we've worked. Basically, the key to the system is to work on blocks as management units. And so I need to find out where those core areas of activity are, and then that's where we would start. I actually think that Center Wellington has got probably a bigger problem than Guelph did at the beginning. There are currently about 1,300 properties in the designated areas, and that's larger than Guelph ever had. So now those 1,300 properties are based on a 400 feet perimeter drawn around known properties. And that was, I don't know, a decade or so ago. So definitely things would have coalesced, intensified within those blocks in the intervening time. And the survey that we did in Woolwich last summer showed us very clearly that the infested blocks fill in entirely before the termites manage to creep onto another block. And so it generally intensifies in those blocks that have been infested for a long time. I know they've been on Garifraxa. I remember collecting them for Mr. Surgeoner, who, I don't know if he lives in that neighborhood anymore, Gord Surgeoner, but I was on his property on Garifraxa a good 20 years ago at least. And so I'm sure, and that's a rather large block. I think there are around 40 properties within that block, and probably everybody's infested. What I do is I like to take an entire block that is known to have termites and designate that as a red zone, and then completely delimit the area, and on the perimeter of that have a blue zone. What I'm afraid of in Laura and Fergus is that it might be a long way out before we get to the blue zone, and we might just designate certain blocks as red zones. work entirely on red zones and over time shift to other red zones. Because I think if you were to actually use my budget formula, you would be talking about more money than you want to be spending annually. And so I think it might have to be stretched out over time. That's all I have to say for now.
Great. Thanks very much, Dr. Miles, and thanks for coming today. I'll turn things over for questions, a round of questions from council and comments, and then we'll get the recommendation out there. But let's start, let's go around the room first to any questions and comments that people have, starting with Councilor McCray.
Thank you, Mayor Linton. I have a few questions for Dr. Miles. Dr. Miles, you mentioned surveying known neighborhoods. What about surveying other neighborhoods that currently we do not know if they have problems? Is that something that you would look at some point? And may I just ask my second question? And I guess the other thing you were saying is that, and that's related to Brett, is that the understanding is if we delay too long in dealing with termites, the problem gets even bigger and bigger, that then it becomes even more of a problem to try and deal with. So now is the time when we should really be looking at tackling these things before allowing them to expand even more.
Well, I think that's obviously the case with any kind of infestation. What was the first part of your question? Sorry.
The first part of my question was, you've mentioned about wanting to resurvey known neighborhoods with termite activity. Are you also planning to survey other neighborhoods that do not have known termite activity to ensure that we do not have clusters sitting out there?
I'm just intending to survey about the 1,300, all of the 1,300 within the designated area. That designated area has a fairly wide perimeter built into it already. So I wouldn't, I mean, we could, the cost would be about $10 per property. I'm planning to do that over the next 6, between now and the end of September. We could continue to operate this season. Well, you really can't go very much past September. It gets a little bit too late to do field surveys after that.
And Councilor McCray, did you have a question for Brett?
No, I think it was just sort of highlighting his comment that the longer we delay, the bigger the problem becomes and the harder it is to deal with it. So better we deal with it now.
Okay, thanks. Councilor Dunsmore?
Yep, first question is for Dr. Miles, and then I have one for Brett as well. But Dr. Miles, what kind of things can we do outside your study? We get you doing your study to figure out where they are and what the scope of the problem is. One of the things I keep hearing is that people are moving these termites themselves through actions like buying mulch or picking up a clay structure or a wooden shed from an area and then putting it in their own property, and it's infested. So this colony gets to spread across the river, so to speak. Is there any educational materials that you use to help educate the public in general on what things to do to protect their own home? You're muted, sir. You're still muted. There you go.
Yeah, it's a very good point, and I do have educational materials. We have a little newsletter called Termite Tips and a variety of other little publications that comprise our program. And once we get past the survey and into the program phase, we would just adapt all that stuff for Center Wellington and make it available, I suppose, online, and make a little booklet or something of all of our materials. And yeah, you do need to have a designated landfill. I don't know what landfill you use or what transfer station you use, but we have disposal waivers that allow people to take up to 225 kilograms, which is about a truckload, a pickup load, anytime they want from the termite management area to our waste transfer site without any cost. And that's a good element of the program to prevent people from spreading it and dumping things in vacant lots and so forth.
Great. It seems to me if we spend all this money and then people start doing stuff like that, the problem's going to get outside the scope of the area that you're looking at. And that'll make it more difficult for us to contain it. I appreciate that. My second question is for Brett. A couple of questions about building materials. There are materials out there, I believe, that are termite resistant. Do we have any authority as a municipality to force builders to use those types of materials?
Well, some of the builders, and we do put it in all our subdivision agreements, but we do work with the builders when they're in the known termite zones to use termite resistant construction techniques and minimize the wood to soil contact. So I guess the question is, it means that we always have to have a good handle on the extent of the termite problem. Otherwise, we'd be sort of forcing builders to spend extra money on houses at a time when affordability is a big issue too. So we want to make sure we're only targeting the areas that really need it. But so, for example, Ms. Rutherford in her comments made the subdivisions on South River Road that are coming up. They are adjacent to the termite, known termite area, and we are working with the future builders there. They know about the termite issue, and other subdivisions, and Alora Keating's done it for years. Whitehaven does it too. So. Okay. I think I had one more question. The maps, Brett. There were old maps out there. We've stopped using them. I've had a resident contact me, and they don't want their property listed on any map termite. Is there a way, if we get these maps going again, so that we can mark the area? If we update these maps, do we keep them internal or do we publish them on the website? Maybe that's a question for Andy. Do we publish these things on the website, or is that something we keep internally and real estate agents access?
It sounds to me that, you just turn your, I'm hearing some echoing here. That's probably a council decision. We direct staff to do what we want to as a council decision, and a staff supported decision to move away from that for some reasons in the past. So we'd have to, as a council, we'd have to have that discussion and provide direction to staff like we do in a number of different areas. So I think that would be something that is kind of downstream after we have Dr. Miles on board for a while. We identify what the nature of the project problem is and what areas we're talking about. There'll be policy discussions that we'll have to have as a council, how deeply we want to get into it, and I'm sure that we'll have those. But I think we need the background information that Dr. Miles is going to provide first, and that gives us what we need to have those policy discussions.
May I just say that the municipalities have taken different approaches. Some don't make that available and don't put it on the websites. Kitchener hasn't posted any maps, whereas others, like Guelph, put out an annual report and it's available to the world. So it's up to council.
Councilor Kitchus?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to sort of thank Tammy for being a delegation and presenting her story, which is a frightening story for any homeowner, and for Dr. Miles for coming and explaining what he's going to be doing. I have a question for, I guess, Brett, and I'm just wondering about if we just use the areas that we knew previously on a map, and not do a comprehensive study, wouldn't that eventually lead to problems, because you might have in the pursuing years transfers of properties to different, and would be good to know, you know, if there's problems in different areas of our community, so that they can be dealt with in a comprehensive way. So I was just wondering about that for Brett.
Yeah, I mean, the best answer I can give, it's early days. We've asked Dr. Miles for his advice, and the advice he's given us is to do the survey that he's taken our maps and recommended the sort of sequential survey approach. If we start seeing that he reports back that there's some serious concentrations in certain areas, we can certainly, as he said, for a relatively modest cost, expand the areas a little bit around the perimeters, which would make sense. There are, if you look at the termite map for Elora, for instance, there are some areas that are quite disjointed, where they're not, there's termite areas that are not adjacent to any other ones. So it is worth considering that aspect, I guess.
Councillor McElwain?
I think I'm okay now. I have a couple of questions. I guess starting with Brett. Well, when we council passed the motion way back in 2016 that we were going to repeal the termite bylaw and move it into the property standards bylaw, I guess we discovered then in the spring that that bylaw was actually never repealed. Is that true? With the termite control bylaw is still on the books? And if so, are we planning on kind of updating it like Wells termite control bylaw and giving us some real teeth? I just, for instance, this spring, early summer, I saw a home on Water Street that had a whole big truckload of mulch dropped on their front lawn. Obviously wasn't bark mulch, and Water Street's right in the termite control area. Actually, it was on yeah, I think it was on Water Street, I believe. Anyhow, we need to have more control, I think, to help, as Neil had mentioned earlier, about making sure that our residents don't just destroy any good work that is done by Dr. Miles in the short term. And I think a better termite control bylaw is kind of almost required to do that.
I would say, you know, Guelph has been pretty successful, and they do a whole range of activities. And so when we get the maps and we work on a program with Dr. Miles, I agree it should look at whether the bylaw needs to get updated. I can't speak to how it was created in the first place. And so for sure that's something that's on the table, that we need to look at the bylaw. We have not repealed it, so it's still there. Whether it needs to be updated as a result of the work that we're doing, I think that's a logical outcome.
Thanks. Question for Dr. Miles, if I could. We had a brief interchange of emails a week or so ago about the 2 new products that have been approved by the PMRA in the last 3 years. One of them was Ultraset, which is kind of the same technology that we've been using all along. It just seems to have a longer period between uses. I think they rated up to 9 years, and Richard Murphy, who I was talking to in Toronto, has said he recommends 7. So I wanted to get your input on that, but also I think the one that is the most exciting is Centricom. So I just, and we're still waiting on, I understand, in Canada to actually get it delivered, even though it has now been approved. So that one sounds like what kind of doing a little bit of what you do, really, with your role of catching and releasing, but it's not really the same, but it's similar type of technology, and and cleans out the whole nest. I don't think it's called a nest, but anyhow, can I just get your comments on those two, please?
You're still muted, Dr. Miles.
Okay. I saw Tammy hold up her hand, and I think what she wanted to say is that she has Ultraset, and yet she's had that record of repeat treatments at her property. So what was in the sales material on Ultraset is that it was a non-repellent termiticide, and that you could put it in the ground, the termites wouldn't detect it, and they would continue to forage through it, and that would kill them. Well, I don't think so. I think her case is pretty good evidence that doesn't always work. So I don't think Ultraset is much of a game changer. Now, Centricon could be. It's based on the idea, it's a chitin synthesis inhibitor. Insects and other invertebrates have chitin. They molt periodically as they grow. And if you can't synthesize your chitin, then you fail to molt properly, and that's how it works. So it does require continuous consumption because you've got termites at all different age groups and stages. They have to eat it and consume it a certain quantity before it interrupts with their molting. I've worked with some of those chitin synthesis inhibitors where I've had termites feeding on them for 3 months continuously in the laboratory, and they look fine. Nothing happened. So on the other hand, they claim, and you know, they started with a variety of different chemical analogs. They've now got something called Novaflumeron, which supposedly worked better than the original Centricon. And they said that 3 months always wipes out the colony. So that would, you know, I've tried to contact Richard Murphy today and also tried to contact Dow AgroSciences, which is the manufacturer of that chemical. And they haven't got back to me yet. What's evidently it's been registered for a year or so, and yet nobody is using it, and they're not delivering it, and there doesn't seem to be a sales or technical representative. So I do not understand why they have gone through the trouble of getting Canadian registration and then just are sitting on their hands. I would be very happy to incorporate that in my program and test it if it would be economically feasible to do so within the cost parameters of what I'm considering doing. As I'm suggesting, my system takes 5 years to, you know, reach a gradual tapering off the population. If that could be done in 1 quarter, wow, that would be a breakthrough. I think if you implemented it on a block-wide basis and it really works that fast, you know, maybe you could get it done in 1 year. So I would love to test that product. I'll keep you updated.
Thanks, Dr. Miles. I want to remind Council, we're talking about allowing Dr. Miles to move ahead on a survey. So let's try to stay focused. I don't want to get too deep into what solutions are potentially available. That's going to come out at the end of this project. But our recommendation is pretty simple here. Let Dr. Miles start this work and then talk about the capital expenses during our budget process. So, and there could be different options that come out of that, but let's stay focused on what we're asking right now. Councillor Van Leeuwen.
Thanks. I think it's definitely a good idea that we look into this, and I like it that we're starting with the survey. We're getting good data before we actually jump right in to say, okay, where are we going with it? The termite update, the actual bylaw, it says that that future capital expenses regarding termite management be considered as part of the 2021 budget process. And I'm wondering if we could also add that alternative funding methods be considered as well when we look at that. The reason I say that, I'm trying to brainstorm on things. I know a few years back we had like a subdivisions or areas where we had drainage issues from past, and we're able to look at those areas and say, collectively, and I think that's the main thing, is it's counterproductive for one person to try to, treat their house, and it keeps pushing to the next. I'm not 100% sure what the name of that was, whether it's a community area upgrade improvement area, but we did use that in order to help fund a portion of that project, and I think it was on, I want to say, the south side of Elora. So if we could consider something like that, I think that should also be considered while we're looking at the 21 budget. Thanks.
So I think what you're talking about, Councilor Van Leeuwen, is area specific charges. So I think that, we could change the wording, but I can't imagine that wouldn't be part of the nature of our conversation moving ahead with this anyway. Somebody is paying for it. So we're going to, as a council, we're going to have to determine where that revenue to cover this off is going to come from. If you wanted to amend that recommendation to include some wording along those lines, and we have a seconder there, we can see that as a friendly amendment to this. So is that what you want to do, Councilor Finley? You want to put that out as a motion?
Yeah, I'm just thinking how I would that future capital expense regarding termite management be considered as part of 2021 budget process, and that staff bring forward recommendations on alternative source of revenue based on area-wide zones.
What about, and that alternative funding sources be explored, and leave it at that?
Yeah, I like that, yeah.
Thanks to our clerk for the wordsmithing there. So you put that out as a motion. Is there anybody that wants to second that motion? Councilor Kittrus? Are you seconding that? Yes, okay. Councilor Kittrus is seconding that motion. Any discussion on that? Discussion on that? Any discussion on the amendment? Okay, any discussion on that amendment? Councilor Foster?
Thank you. Thank you, Kelly. I have mixed feelings about that, Stephen, only because it kind of complicates the motion. I'm not sure it's going to be effective. Step one is a decision to proceed, and there's no doubt in my mind that we've got to do something. Also, if we're going to sort of bog down in the cost, then it negates the need for collective action in my mind. So if cost becomes prohibitive, we're going to shoot ourselves in the foot here, because if one homeowner treats their home and another doesn't because of cost, then it's going to kill the program. So I get where you're going, Stephen. We have to find a way to pay for this, but collective action is going to be required to solve this problem, number one. And number two, your motion complicates, I think, this decision. So I'm not sure it's a good approach yet.
Any other comments on the amendment, Councillor McLean?
I agree with Bob. I think it just makes the motion today a little more complex. I mean, that's a discussion for the 2021 budget discussions, not now.
I think the only comment I would make on that, Councillor McLean, is we go into those budget discussions, and we'd have them anyway. But we go into those budget discussions, and staff would be more prepared because we're providing that direction to staff. So that would be the only comment that I have.
I just feel that making this, making it part of the budget discussions early like this as part of today's discussion what we want to do today is get Dr. Miles started with his first step of his journey, and do the inspections, and then get that into our minutes and approved. And when we get to the 21 budget discussions, then we have to figure out how we're going to pay for the phases 2, 3, and 4 kind of thing. And we worry about that then. We don't worry about it today. It's adding an extra level of complexity into a discussion today that should be fairly straightforward.
Councilor Kittrus?
Thank you, Mayor. The reason I have okayed or second this is it does have in the motion that we will be discussing the budgeting implications of this. It doesn't delay Dr. Miles doing anything right now. And it does direct staff to look at several different ways of financing it. And then they'll have been prepared for it, just as the mayor said. And it's just, we might not do those, but it's just that they have the time in their direction. You don't want to go into budget season where all of a sudden we say, oh, well, let's look at different budgeting options. Like, because it's already too late. And so now they'll have been directed to look at all those things.
Councilor McCray?
Thank you, Mayor Linton. From my perspective, I agree with what Councillor Kittrus is saying, is if this is just asking staff to look at other alternative methods of financing this now as opposed to later during the budget process, then I also support bringing this forward now as well. But I guess the one other thing I just want to say is from my own perspective is that we take a similar approach to how we did with the bridges, where the entire community has invested in replacing our bridges and repairing them. I think this is an entire community project as well as how do we address termites, because they may not be on my property today, but they could be there tomorrow. So I think we all have to look at, we all need to pitch in and get rid of these doggone beasties.
Councilor Dunsmore, did you want to say anything on this one?
No, I support the amendment. I just could ask you to call the question.
Okay, so we'll call the question. It was moved by Councilor Van Leeuwen, seconded by Councilor Kittrus, that yet we add a phrase in there and staff pursue alternative funding arrangements. All in favor of that amendment? Opposed? And that carries. Yeah. So we just passed it with a friendly amendment, and so that's good. So that means that this project will start, and welcome aboard Dr. Miles to move ahead on this. We're excited to have you on board, and I know that there's going to be key policy decisions that we're going to have to make as a council afterwards. But doing the survey and having you on board is great. And thanks, Councillor McElwain, for bringing this to our attention. And we'll go ahead and hopefully do something good for our community.
Kelly, point of order.
Councillor Foster?
I didn't get a chance to ask Dr. Miles 2 or 3 questions, notwithstanding what you just said. I wondered if I might ask Dr. Miles a couple of questions. I wasn't given a chance to pose them.
Yeah, that's how the process goes when there's a mover, and we actually changed the recommendation, and it was called the question, and we passed the change recommendation. So it's the ship that ship has sailed. So we're going to move on to the next item right now.
Your Worship, I just simply wanted to ask a couple of questions. I believe, as a point of order, we all have a chance to speak. I wasn't given that chance.
All right, well, you are right about that, even though I'm not sure what it matters now since it was passed, but if you would like to speak, go ahead. I think Dr. Miles might be gone already, because the recommendation was already passed.
Well, he's gone. I don't see him on the screen. Are you there, Dr. Miles? It's too late, Kelly.
Yeah, remember, we're gonna be bringing him back a budget, so that's the
Well,
main.
Kelly, this is.
I'd just like to remind members of council, can we please call each other councillor and mayor? I don't want to go to this. I've mentioned this before. I'd like us to stay away from the first name basis. This is an official council.
Certainly, Mayor. Certainly, Mayor.
And please, let's stick to that, okay? As far as the point of order goes, when there's I can't control what happens when there's an amendment and then there's a seconder to that amendment and people speak. Can we pass a recommendation that's different than the first one? That's just the nature of.
Your worship, you hold the gavel. You do control the flow and the procedure.
Yeah, so let's move on to the second one. I'm controlling the gavel right now. Okay, 7.2, part law control exemption bylaw, blocks 103, 105, plan 61. And I'll turn things over to Brett Salmon, our managing director of planning. Brett?
Thank you, Mayor Linton. This is a part law control exemption bylaw for 3 blocks of townhouses that are in Summerfield's subdivision. And as you know you've done a couple of these at the last council meeting, it's the part law controls that are used to divide the townhouse blocks into the lots that get sold to the future purchasers. So these are the last 3 blocks of townhouses in Summerfield's, and they're ready for their part law control.
Thanks, Brett. Any questions from council on this item? Okay, I will read the recommendation that the Council of the Township of Center Wellington authorize the mayor and clerk to execute a bylaw to exempt blocks 103 to 105 of Plan 61M-225 from the part lot control provisions of the plan. Move for that recommendation. Councilor Dunsmore, seconded by Councilor McCray. All in favor? Opposed? And that carries. Moving on to the heritage permit application. And we have a report from our senior planner, Mariana. Welcome, Mariana.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Linton. The report before you is for a heritage permit application for alterations to the property at 7224 Side Road 10. That's in former Pilkington Township. Council approval is required because the property is designated under the Ontario Heritage Act. It's a 1902 red brick former schoolhouse. Currently supports a residential use. The details for the alterations are provided in the report before you, but generally include a removal of the second-story balcony that was installed in the 1970s, installation of a new dormer on the other side to sort of mirror the existing dormer of the roof, and then a couple of new openings at the rear of the property. So, as required, Heritage Center Wellington was consulted on the application, and staff and the Heritage Committee have been working with the architect on the project and are satisfied with the proposed alterations and feel that they're in keeping with the generally accepted heritage principles. At the Heritage Committee's first online meeting and their last meeting, they did approve the application. So they are, recommending approval of the application to council, and therefore staff recommend that council approve the application and will be pleased to answer any questions.
Thanks very much, Mariana. Questions from council, starting with Councillor Foster. Councillor Van Leeuwen?
No, it's not really a question, it's more a comment. It's definitely, I have to give credit to the Heritage Committee. It's a lot of work doing heritage permits on Zoom meetings, a lot of information passing back and forth in emails ahead of time. How do you design this? What do you think of that? It's really, really difficult, and yet they get through these permits and these applications, and they have a few more before them. So I'm glad to see that they're back at work and we can see some of this stuff going through. So I'd like to say thanks to the Heritage Committee for giving their best effort through all these strange times for sure. That's all. Thanks.
Councillor Van Loon. Councillor McElwain? Councillor Kittrus?
Nothing.
Councillor Dunsmore?
No comments.
Councillor McCray?
No comments.
Okay, I read the recommendation of the Council of the Township of Center Wellington approves Heritage Permit Application HP 2020-002 for the alterations to the designated property municipally known as 7224 Side Road 10, Pilkington, pursuant to Section 33 of the Ontario Heritage Act, RSO 1990 C018. Move for that recommendation. Councillor Dunsmore, seconded by Councillor McCray. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you very much, Mariana. Moving on to Sole Source Award Smart Meter Program, and we have a report from our Managing Director of Corporate Services. Dan, welcome.
Thanks, Mayor Linton. I'm going to tag team with Colin on this one, if you don't mind. This is for the AMI Smart Meter Pilot Capital Project that was approved as part of the 2020 capital budget. So Colin's going to provide an overview and scope of work, and then I will wrap up with my comments.
Great. Thanks, Dan. Mayor Linton, members of council, thanks so much. So as Dan mentioned, this is related to the AMI, our Advanced Metering Infrastructure Smart Meter Pilot Project that was approved in the 2020 capital budget. And essentially a few things happening here. So as council is hopefully aware of, our technology is for water meters since they were installed back in the early 2000s is from a vendor called Neptune. It's their technology using the water meters as well as the meter reading devices, the data management software, as well as the billing software. It's all from Neptune. And essentially what's happening is a couple things. So we are no longer able to, I guess the meter reading device as well as the software is no longer being supported. So it's like an initial generation device and software. And so there's an upgrade required there. And with the capital project, we see this as a good opportunity to essentially, accomplish a couple of objectives. So replace that meter reading device, as well as the software, get it to the most current version of the meter reading software, as well as implement the AMI program, which will lean pretty heavily on this updated software. And so we've recommending that we proceed with the company called Evans Supply, which is the supplier for Neptune water meters. And essentially it allows us to bring in new equipment, new software, new hardware that's compatible with our existing system. So we'll have a very smooth integration right from the start. And I think that's about all I'll add. There's definitely lots of benefits. I could speak for quite a while on the benefits for advanced metering infrastructure, but I think I'll just maybe open it up for questions at this point, or hand it over to Dan if you've got anything else to add.
Dan?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Linton. Thanks, Colin. So our purchasing bylaw does allow us to negotiate with a specific vendor if they're uniquely qualified to perform work. And in this case, it's a compatibility issue, as Colin mentioned. Through the 2020 capital budget, a $60,000 budget was approved for this project, which would include any non-rebate HST that would be incurred on the contract itself. So with that, we are recommending entering into a contract with Evans Supply, not to exceed $60,000 inclusive of the non-rebate HST.
Thanks very much, Dan. Thanks very much, Colin. Questions from council? starting with Councilor McCray.
Thank you, Mayor Linton. This question is for Colin. So the purpose of this pilot project, in terms of putting up an antenna, putting in new meters, is currently when we go around measuring meter use, somebody has to physically drive around a car with a meter monitor and record the meter reading. What this will do is no longer will people have to drive around. You'll be able to just bring this information in off the antenna and update invoices, etc. Is that correct?
Yes, through Mayor Linton, that's exactly correct. Right now, we're limited by like a physical download once per month, someone driving through the community. We do get some information done remotely, but essentially a lot of it's done with someone driving through the community. This will allow for real-time data access to water use data. So from the homeowner's perspective or the business owner's perspective, they'll be able to see their water use in real time once this system is fully implemented. So things like you can set alerts if you have a leak happening or some higher water use. You would have the ability to set an alert that would send you an email or a notification of that high water use. So from a customer service, customer interaction standpoint, we're pretty excited about this new technology and just some of the opportunities it's going to open up as it is implemented.
So this is basically a win-win for the community, is what I'm hearing.
Absolutely. Yeah, huge win for the customers, for the community, huge win for the township. It gives us a lot of operational data with the system in terms of leaks. We can also expand it to get temperature and pressure readings as well, real time in the system. So the future is now, and we're pretty excited about it.
Councilor Dunsmore?
Yeah, I like the technology. I think it's worthwhile. I would have loved when I lost the main floor of my house to a flood to have gotten an alert by water usage way over normal. So I think it's time for this technology to come into play. So I'm all for it.
Councilor Kitchers?
Thank you, Mayor. This is a question for Dan. Was this tendered? And is this the only person that is available to do this technology?
Through Mayor Wellington, no, the tendered. The purpose of the report is to, through certain provisions of the purchasing bylaw, not go through the tendering process and award strictly to Evans Supply. I don't know, Colin, if you want to provide comments around other suppliers providing this service.
There's a few throughout Ontario, not many per se, but essentially it's upgrading a portion of our technology, software and hardware. So we're really looking, if we were to upgrade everything, I think we'd be into some fairly significant costs. And that would be the case if we went with another vendor. Again, this is a portion of our data management software and some hardware upgrades. And so just from an integration with what we have existing, that's why we're recommending the sole source at this time.
And I just wanted to remind council that is why this project is coming to council, because it is a sole source. Otherwise, this would be one that decision that could be made by our administration. Councilor McElwain?
No comment.
Councilor Van Leeuwen?
No comment. Thanks.
Councilor Foster?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to ask Colin, this expense, Colin, appears to help reduce the need to drive around and check meters manually. Will this expense then help reduce other operating costs? Will we see cost savings? For example, would this technology allow us to eliminate 1 or 2 half-ton trucks and thereby reduce our operating costs because of the savings from this technology and the reduced need to drive around and check meters?
Yeah, through Mayor Linton. So the process, the way it works now is it's actually a third-party contractor that drives around. So over time, as we move into full implementation, that third-party contractor would be no longer required. So certainly with a fixed system where we can obtain data remotely, there would be a savings because that contractor would no longer be required. And again, so there's no township vehicles doing that work. It would be a third party.
Councillor Foster, follow one.
Colin, just if you could just be more specific, we're reducing our operating costs. We're eliminating a need to drive around. Will this mean a reduction in the size of your half-ton truck fleet? Yes or no?
No, it wouldn't. Again, it's done by a third party. So we don't do it internally. It's done by a third party. So it would eliminate the need to retain that third party to collect the data.
Okay, I'm going to read the recommendation. The Council of the Township of Center Wellington authorizes sole source contract award to Evans Supply Limited for the completion of an AMI smart meter pilot capital project at a total upfront limit of $60,000 inclusive of non-rebate HST. Mover for that recommendation, Councillor McCray, seconded by Councillor McElwain. All in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. Thank you very much, Council. Thanks, Dan and Colin. Moving on to 7.5, appointment to the Grove Memorial Community Hospital Board of Directors. There's a report, and Carrie can provide any answers to a report, but it is fairly straightforward. I'll read the recommendation that the Council of the Township of Center Wellington confirm the appointments of the following members to the Grove Memorial Community Hospital Board of Directors. Anthony Caldwell, 1-year term expiring 2021. Gord Feniak, 1-year term expiring 2021. Jackie Rand, 2023, and Paul Smith, 1-year term expiring 2021. Mover for that recommendation, Councillor McElwain, seconded by Councillor Dunsmore. Any questions? All in favor? And that is carried. Really appreciate all the work that the volunteers do on this board, and it's going to be an exciting year for our hospital, so an exciting year for the board of directors. Moving on to 7.6, conferences, training, and education opportunities. And I will turn it over to our CAO, Andy.
Thank you, Mayor Linton. This is a report just basically revising and updating the council conference training and education opportunities policy that has been set for a number of years. During the budget discussions, there was some questions raised with regards to using the identified funds or the council appointed funds, not only for conferences and training, but also for communications within their ward. So we've added comments and criteria or classifications of what things can be used for the funding, as well as just cleaned up some of the language with regards to the policies with regards to conferences and education. And so that at each year, council sets the budget allocation for how much money is budgeted for council to spend. That is then equally distributed amongst each of the councillors in order to attend various AMO, Good Roads, or FCM, or AMO, Good Roads, and Aroma conferences, or other conferences like EDCO. So those are set out. At the time of the budget, staff will then advise council as to how much money is in each of their budgets for spending over the term. And then based on the criteria, those expenses would be reimbursed based on the policy. So it's a short inclusion with regards to communications within your ward, as well as some updates with regards to expenditures for meals and conferences within the policy. Based on conversations and discussions council has directed staff to at the budget process.
Great, thanks, Andy. And I'll turn it over to questions from members of the council. Starting with Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mayor. And Andy, I don't believe we've had sort of a problem with this in the past. Can you help me understand what's triggered the need for this discussion?
The discussion, the direction was received by council during the 2020 budget year in order to revise. We did not have communications within the budget previous or within the policy previously, so we've added that and updated the policy with regards to allowing some of those funds to be used by each of the councillors for their own work communications.
Following Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mayor. Andy, our previous policy for many years had been that councillors could attend up to 3 conferences per year. Is that still the case going forward with this new policy?
We do not set a limit as to how many conferences or training workshops council is able to go to. Council sets and approves the amount of money funded within the policy, within the budget for each year, and each councillor can spend their money attending as many as they wish. However, it is limited within whatever council sets as the overall budget for council.
Following Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you hear me okay? There we go. Thank you, Mayor. Andy, 2006 to 2010, our policy was indeed 3 conferences per year. Is that still the case, or is there any such? When was that rescinded, or when did it change? And does it still stand?
Councillor Foster, as I had commented previously to your question, staff do not set the limit of how many conferences or training exercises you're able to go to. Council sets the budget and approves the amount of budget. So whatever you're able to go to within the set budget, that is the amount of money. The budget numbers have been decreasing over the years as per approval by council. So there's less funding in that budget allocation for 2020 than there has been in previous years, and that has been at the direction of council.
Councillor Foster, follow on or not?
Final. Thank you, Mayor. One last question. This initiative appears to be the goal appears to be the controlling the costs of attendance at workshops. My question for Andy: will we see an initiative on the staff side as well to control the cost of attendance at workshops for staff?
This is for council and
Yeah, this is a council policy. That's all staff have been asked to direct to, is with regards to responding to the policy for council expenditures attending. We already have a policy for staff as to what they are able to attend and what they're reimbursed. And it is very similar to the council policy.
So I just wanted to confirm, I didn't see anything related to this being a way to limit costs for members of council. So I just wanted to confirm with our CEO and clerk here that there's nothing in here that talks about that. That's what's established at the budget process time. And when we set that budget, when we're in the budget process time, and when we have those discussions, basically what we're doing is we're looking over the last couple of years and seeing what is being spent by councillors to make sure that we're not over budgeting for councillors going to conferences and seminars and things like that, because we don't want to be charging the taxpayer for money that we haven't been spending. So that's how we've been establishing the budget for this in the past, and that doesn't change. This is just making a few tweaks to the process, but it doesn't get to limiting money spent by councillors for conferences. That's what we're going to do in the budget process. Councillor Van Leeuwen.
No, this was the direction I guess we've given. It's just, I think it was just really about clarity on the communication side. I remember the conversation saying previously kind of a discussion on are we allowed to have our communication because the mayor has communication, and we said yes, and then there was the discussion, can we please get it into a document and clarity, and that is what we see before us, is what I'm assuming. So thank you for the clarity in the document.
Thanks, Councilor Van Leeuwen. That's exactly what it was. Staff was asked to put in place some wording around communication for councillors to reach out to their own ward citizens, because we want to make sure that that's part of it. Some councillors don't feel the need to go to conferences and seminars, but they do feel the need to connect with their citizens, and they don't want that coming out of their pocket. So we wanted to make sure that this was seen as being something that's beneficial for councillors to have access to. Small amount of funds where they could do things to increase the communication with their ward citizens. Councillor McLean.
Thanks. Just the council requisition form, that's what is required. You have to fill that in to get to be able to use it for communications. Is that the idea? Because that's a new form for us, so I've never seen that one before.
Correct. The form is new. That doesn't mean you need to fill it in prior. If you put out a publication or an advertisement or send out some newsletters, you would just have to provide the receipts back to the clerks in order to reimburse.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had a question for, I don't know whether it's for Andy or for Dan. What is the average cost to go to conference meetings? Like, what's the average cost to go to the AMO and to the Roma and stuff like that?
So depending on where a councillor or staff person stays, I believe it's about $800 for AMO conference fees, and probably about the same for hotel cost, and then there'll be new costs. Specifically, AMO and Roma do provide both breakfasts and lunches for the attendee within the conference fee, and it typically only ends up being dinner costs that are additional costs to those conferences. So I would say it's typically for the large conferences somewhere between $1,200 and $1,800 to attend.
Councilor Dunsmore?
I'm happy with this report. I was pleased to see that there's a line in there about being reimbursed for the lesser cost of a flight, a round trip flight versus driving, so that if it is out of the area you want to drive, you're not going to get paid for that. You could fly cheaper. The township is on the hook for the lesser of the two. That was it.
Councilor McCray?
Thank you, Mayor Lynn. I'm glad to see this. I think it brings some clarity to the whole issue around reimbursing counselors for attending training. One concern I have is use of your own vehicle. I guess from my perspective, I'm looking at we should have a limit on, if you're going to use your own vehicle, it should not be more than 200 kilometers. After that, you need to consider renting a car. Because looking into this, if, for example, one was to decide to drive their own car to Ottawa, you're looking at approximately $584 round trip that you would be reimbursing a counselor for. Whereas if you were to rent a car, assuming that was $75 a day, you're looking at probably in the neighborhood of $225 for use of a car. That's considerably less money than if we were to go with a lesser cost of a flight to Ottawa as opposed to the person using their personal vehicle. That's something that we used to do at our own corporation, is we had a limit that you could not use your personal vehicle for more than 200 kilometers. Otherwise, you had to switch to a rental car, which was cheaper. So that was something I'd like to recommend, is that we put something in there to further reduce the cost to the taxpayer.
So So you're recommending a modification to this report, that if it would be cheaper to rent a vehicle versus getting the per kilometer cost back for your own vehicle, that the town would only pay for the invoice for renting a vehicle.
Yes, so for example, if we set the limit of 200 kilometers, anything over 200 kilometers requires looking into the use of a rental vehicle, that if that's cheaper than the 200 kilometers, then you have to go with a rental vehicle.
Okay, so I think that's clear, and that's a motion, Councilor McCray. So you're putting that motion forward?
Yes, I will.
Okay, so can we have a seconder for that? And if there's a seconder, are you seconding that, Councilor Kitchus? Okay, so you're seconding that.
I am.
Okay. Any discussion about the amendment to this recommendation to include that item? Councilor Foster?
Thank you, Mayor. I've probably flown to Ottawa from Toronto, I don't know, 500 times in 15 years. The cost of a flight is probably around $250 round trip. You need a red car to get to Pearson, there's $100. A red car home, now you're up to $450. You need a taxi from Ottawa Airport downtown and one back to catch your flight. So you're into, if you fly to Ottawa and do that, you're into the same approximate dollars as you are by driving your car. So I understand the intent, Councillor McCray, but in most cases, we're going either to Toronto or to Ottawa. Sometimes FCM is out of province, of course, and then it's a different game. But it's not going to. This discussion is almost not going to achieve anything. If you reimburse for the flights and the ground transportation, you're into the same dollars for Ottawa or Montreal as you are just driving. We're talking about pennies here.
So I'm not sure that you're responding to what Councilor McCray was talking about. He was talking about if you do choose to drive, that it would be, the township would only reimburse the lesser of the cost of your vehicle versus a rental vehicle. The clause about the airfare versus travel, that's another item that's already included in this policy. He's adding another point there. Is that accurate, Councilor McCray?
Yes, it is, Marilyn.
Okay. Any other comments about the amendment, Councilor McElwain?
I just want to double check and see if what is just being voted on now is the actual motion that is brought forward with a friendly amendment, or if it's just the amendment, or because last time around we thought we were voting on an amendment, but it ended up being a vote on the whole motion. So, which are we voting on here?
Yeah, this is a little different than the last time. We're voting on just adding one part two to this recommendation. Then we'll go back to the full amended recommendation. Councilor Van Lien?
Thanks. I guess maybe I'm feeling a little bit rushed on this decision on don't put it above $200 with your 200 kilometers with your own vehicle or do a rental car. There's a lot of factors there. If you rent a car, does it go by kilometer? If you're gone for 3 days to 5 days, is it based off days? There's a lot of elements in there. Would it just not be wiser to say we pay the cheapest option? So if you go for a rental quote and it's and the rental quote, you're going to be gone for 3-4 days, is higher than driving your car, and then vice versa. Driving your car is cheaper than, because otherwise I think you get into it, well, you know, the policy says I can't go further than 200 kilometers, but now it's going to cost me for a rental car for 4 or 5 days even more, but you got to obey the policy. For one, am not in favor of adding the 200 kilometers because there's scenarios all the time that we meet, and I think that we should leave it flexible. Township pays the lower travel cost out of the options. That's how I feel about it.
Anybody else want to speak to the amendment, adding amendment? Councilor Kitchers?
Thank you, Mayor. The only reason why I am okaying this amendment that Councillor McCray put forward is that I think reimbursing people that want to drive as opposed to fly is some people don't fly, and it's just they don't fly, and then this includes everybody. I think that if it's cheaper to do with the rental, then that should be considered. I don't think it should be our policy that we always just do the cheapest amount. I think that some people do not fly, and it shouldn't be exclusatory that they won't go to these conferences because they don't fly. And so putting it in, and that it perhaps, as Councillor McCray has said, had lowered the costs in his experience in the private enterprises, that I think that's a worthy thing to add to this policy.
Any other comments about adding this point to the policy? Okay, call the question then, and let's be clear on the question before we get to the full recommendation. What I'm calling the question is adding another point into the policy that if it's over 200 kilometers, that the township will reimburse the cost of a rental vehicle rather than your own personal vehicle. So the $200 is the threshold. Who seconded that again? Councilor Kitchers, right. All in favor of that, adding that point? Opposed? Okay, that's defeated. Now let's go back to the regular recommendation. And where were we in the circle of councillors? Are we at Councillor? Has everybody had a chance?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to read this recommendation, and then we'll go around the room, starting with Councillor Foster. But I'm going to read the recommendation, get a mover and a seconder, that the Council of the Township of Center Wellington adopt the mayor and council conference training and communication policy as outlined in the CAO report dated July 27th, 2020. Mover for that recommendation, Councillor Dunsmore, second by Councillor Van Leeuwen. Go around the table, last comments, and let me know how you vote. Councillor Foster?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. As I can tell, and as I said earlier, this policy appears to have its intention as controlling the costs of attending conferences. Flying to Ottawa, as I pointed out earlier, will cost just about as much as driving to Ottawa. I lived in Ottawa for 4 years, and you're not going to save any money. So it has to question, what's the intention here? I'm okay generally with controlling costs. I'm just trying to point out you're not going to save any money here. So it begs the question, why are we even addressing a problem that doesn't really exist? So in that sense, I'm not totally in favor of the policy because it doesn't accomplish anything in terms of travel within the province, at least.
But I'm not totally in favor. Does that mean you're opposed? Okay, Councillor Van Leeuwen.
Thanks. As we're voting on the recommendation on the thing on our schedule there, which is to adopt the conference training and communication policy as outlined, I would say yes, I'm in favor of that.
Okay, Councillor McElwain.
I'm in favor.
Councillor Kitchers.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't think that, I think it needs to be changed to allow for people to drive and not have to pay the extra cost. I thought the motion that we just defeated would have helped accomplish that, but now it's where everyone to go to the conference by driving will have to pay more money to go out of their own personal. So I'd like that to be discussed a little bit more, and for the policy to have some provisions for that.
Are you in favor or opposed to the motion on the table?
As it is now, no. I would like to adjust it.
As it is now, it's status quo.
Councillor Dunsmore?
I'm for the motion.
Councillor McCray?
I'm glad that we have something in place, but I still have some concerns that there's other things we should consider as councillors to try and reduce the expense to the taxpayer. I suggested something and I still feel we should have something in there. So I'm opposed.
Okay, and I'm in favor. I think this is a clear policy, and the budget comes later, so we can control it as council sees fit at the budget time. So that motion carries. 4-3. Thank you very much for pulling that together. 7.7, Provincial Water Management Framework Review, a report from our Managing Director of Infrastructure Services. Turning it over to Colin.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mayor Linton, members of council. I've also have Kyle Davis on the line. He's taking a break from his vacation to join us today. So thanks to Kyle for taking the time to join us. And I'm going to provide a bit of an introduction to the proposal that's on the environmental registry, and just talk a bit about our comments, and then hand it off to Kyle to speak to some of his comments as well. And then we'll open up for questions after that. So just as a quick high-level summary, back on June 18th, the province posted a regulatory proposal on the Environmental Registry of Ontario entitled Updating Ontario's Water Quantity Management Framework. And it was released for a 45-day public comment period, which expires on Sunday, August the 2nd, which is a little strange. So we're looking at getting comments in by the end of this week. And this proposal is a key part of Ontario's moratorium for new and increased water bottling takings, which is currently set to expire on October 1st, 2020, as council is aware. And so really what this does is kind of lays the groundwork in terms of programs, policies, kind of science tools, and makes some high-level recommendations for provincial action related to water bottling in Ontario. And so there's a couple key reports that I attached to the staff report here. And one is prepared by Blue Metric. Blue Metric Environmental was retained probably back in early 2018 by the province to do a really fulsome review of the issue. So look at water bottling, water quantity study areas. They conducted an overall science review, looked at recommendations, kind of a jurisdictional review of other areas in North America and abroad. And then also they put together a consultation program too. So there's been an external working group that Kyle has participated on that involves water managers across the province. They also hosted a number of workshops back in 2018. So this has been going on for over a couple of years now, and so we're happy to see it kind of come to a completion. The province also retained an independent panel of experts through the Professional Geoscientists of Ontario Association, and they've also peer-reviewed BlueMetric's reports in great detail, and I've attached as PGO's comments on the reports and kind of water management in Ontario as a whole. So another good read if you have the time to review that. And yeah, so just to skip ahead to the main conclusions of the report that BlueMetric and the province came to, it said that Ontario has an effective framework for managing water takings. Bottled water takings are being managed sustainably under existing frameworks. Water resources in Ontario are generally sustainable, and with a few local exceptions. And of course, we were flagged as kind of one of the local exceptions where there's not 100% certainty that there will be sustainable flows for future under drought and climate change conditions, and also identified opportunities to enhance the current management framework to be resilient to current and future challenges. So those are the high-level conclusions, and then they kind of took that to the next level and created four goals. So 4 goals of this proposal, and goal number 1, which is very interesting, is to establish clear provincial priorities for water use. Okay, so we've had a lot of discussion at this. Council's had discussion, staff of looking at priority or the hierarchy of water use in areas where there's competing interests for water use. Goal number 2 is update the province's approach for managing water takings in stressed areas. Goal number 3, make water taking data more accessible. So that would be to the public, to stakeholders, to consultants, to residents, to make it more accessible. And goal number 4 would give host municipalities more input into water bottling decisions. And so we did seek some clarification on that from the province. And just getting into the documents a bit more, it's not what we would call, I guess, a veto, that municipalities would have veto powers over water bottling, I guess, proposals within their municipalities. Rather, it would be, I guess, a very important piece of information the director at the MECP, Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, would take into consideration when evaluating a decision on a permit to take water. So I just wanted to clarify that one. I think that's an important clarification. It's not veto powers, but we're kind of envisioning it would be a council resolution likely that would be considered by the director when there's a proposal for an increased or new permit to take water for a water bottling operation. And so certainly we've attached our comments. They're draft at this point. We'll be looking at finalizing them this week. So Kyle, as risk management official for Wellington County, has his comments drafted, and he's distributed those throughout all local municipalities in the county within Wellington County. And then I've also prepared some comments to be submitted in response to the RO proposal that I'll be looking at submitting later this week. And of course, from the township's perspective, staff perspective, we support the proposed hierarchy or priority, establishing priorities for water use. Townships, municipalities are investing significant dollars in infrastructure with long-term plans, with population and employment growth, where we establish water supply master plans that identify our future water needs. These are important pieces that are implemented over time, and significant dollars are being invested to implement these plans over a long period of time. So really, there's got to be an overarching strategy in order to manage the water resource in the vicinity of the serviced area within the township, within municipalities, in order to make wise, smart decisions when it comes to groundwater takings. And I think I'll leave it there. Maybe I'll hand it over to Kyle if you can weigh in and maybe provide some comments on your letter as well.
Thanks, Colin, and I'll turn it over to Kyle. Thanks for taking up a little bit of your vacation. So go through this real quick and get back to the beach, Kyle.
Yeah, it shows that you're just on mute there, Kyle. I don't know if
Unless he is at the beach and he just put his name up there. There he is.
There we go.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mayor Linton. Yeah, hopefully everyone can hear me okay.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So yeah, no, I think Colin covered it off fairly well in terms of the comments, in terms of the proposal. I think the only thing I would probably add is that the province has indicated that this is the enabling legislation proposal, and really it's the policy framework. So they do expect other postings in the future. They said possibly this year. They're planning on this year, and that's the detailed proposal, the ERO posting that I referred to in my comments in a number of times. So this is sort of the high level enabling legislation is what they're looking at here. And then they would be looking at more detailed guidance documents, updating of various internal guidance documents, public guidance documents, as well as some of the regulation language. So I think Colin highlighted kind of all the main parts to it. So I'd be happy just to answer questions if there are any.
Great. Thanks very much, Colin, and thanks very much, Kyle. I know this is a lot of work, and it's really important work for our township. And thanks for pulling those comprehensive notes and that report together for the ministry. Appreciate all the work that's been going on into this report. Turn it over to Council. Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mayor. Very excellent report. Thank you very much. No questions.
Councillor Van Leeuwen?
No, nothing at this time. Thanks.
Councillor McElwain?
There we go. I do have a question, I guess, for Kyle first. I noticed in your report, Kyle, that you mentioned that you didn't feel that water bottling should be the only water taking permits that could be kind of have a township input as far as support. You thought it should be greater, and I agree with you. I think there probably, if there is a shortage of water, there should be some kind of mechanism to talk about aggregate or golf courses or anything else that uses a lot of water. But the one thing I would suggest is that water bottling is a totally consumptive action versus the others where the water does return to the water table. And so I think there should be differentiation between the two of them. So it was just my comment. That's, you're the expert and I'm not.
Thank you very much for your comment, Councillor McElwain, through you, Mayor Linton. Yes, the idea with that proposal or that comment, I suppose, was just following along on the conclusions of the Blue Metric work, and that was also backed up with the PGO work in regards to water bottling and the percentage of its use in the province. And also following up on the work that we've been doing on our Tier 3, all here in Center Wellington as well as other parts of the county, where there are other water takers that are subject to the Tier 3 policies. So the way I framed that comment was that in a management area, so a WPQ, a water protection area quantity, or there could be other criteria for a management area. The province is looking for ideas on that right now. That the water takers in that area, regardless whether it's water bottlers or others, would be kind of subject to that extra level of basically public input through their elected municipal council. And in conjunction with that, also recommended the lowering of the threshold from the proposed 379,000 liters a day to 50,000 liters a day. And in discussions with the province, that the larger threshold was chosen because they didn't want to burden smaller businesses in areas where there may not be a water issue. However, our thought process on it was that if you do have an identified area with a WPQ or low water conditions, then really that threshold should be the permit to take water threshold.
Thanks, Kyle. Councillor Citrus.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question also for Kyle, and it's a follow-up from Councillor McElwain's. Are you saying that if a company wants to put canning facilities, either soft drink or brewery or anything like that, they would have to go through and get public input on that?
Thank you, Councillor Citrus. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, in the sense that what we're suggesting to the province is that it would be host municipality input. So it would be public input in the sense that it would be through their elected municipal council. So it would be, basically what we're suggesting is the process that the province is proposing for water bottlers be expanded to other water takers, which currently it would not be. So from your example of a canning or a brewery, which would also be a totally consumptive use, a pop bottle, soda pop manufacturer or something like that, that currently would not require, under their proposal, host municipality input through a council resolution. So that's why we're suggesting in expanding that requirement to be all water takers greater than 50,000 liters in an area that's identified as a stressed area or an area requiring area management, which is the goal 2 discussion in the ministry's proposal.
Councillor Citrus, follow on.
If the company is using municipal water, would that still be required? This is for Kyle.
Yes, thank you for the question. Through you, Mr. Mayor. No, my understanding it would not be because this is only for the permit to take water, and there is some discussion in my comments around that a little bit, in the sense that municipal water is not just drinking water; it's also industrial commercial water. So the permit to take water decision would have already been made by the province on the municipality's permit to take water. So there wouldn't have been that host municipality input in that sense for a canning or a beverage manufacturer, 5-10 years down the road, because that amount of water would already have been approved through the municipal drinking water license and permit process.
Councillor Dunsmore?
No questions. Just wanted to thank Kyle for taking time out of his vacation to answer our questions.
Councillor Craig?
Thank you, Mayor Lynn. To both Colin and Kyle, I'd just like to say great report, an excellent and thoughtful and comprehensive response that raises some very good points for the province to consider. So well done, gentlemen.
Okay, great. Thanks, councillors. I will read the recommendation that the Council of the Township of Center Wellington receive for information an update on the Provincial Water Management Framework and Environmental Registry of Ontario proposal related to municipal priority of water use. Have a mover for that recommendation? Councillor McCray, second by Councillor McElwain. All in favor? And that is carried. Moving on to Section 8, we have 4 information items. Consolidated Delegation of Authority Report for 2019, Tender Award Committee Report from April to June, Managing the Impacts of COVID, a report from our CAO, and our committee of the whole tracking with 2019 to 2022. Any questions for any of those information items from council? Councillor Kittrus?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess it's 8.3. I have a question as to when council will, there's two questions for the CAO. When council will be meeting in person, and the second one is when we will be redelegating powers to council instead of the CAO.
We're still reviewing, looking at sometime this fall to reinstating meetings. We're still looking at what some of the guidelines will be or are set out by Wellington Dufferin Guelph Public Health with regards to self-distancing. As you know, it will be difficult to get all of those participating in council in a council chambers without proper distancing. So those are things that we're trying to review and see how we operate that for meetings face-to-face. And then second, with regards to the lifting of the emergency declarations, that is, with regards to the lifting is a decision for council and the emergency management team with regards to when that is going to happen. And I know Kelly, as the mayor and warden, is looking and having those discussions with all the mayors across the Wellington County as those were declared together. And at what time will we discontinue those delegations or declaration? I can tell you that at the province, although they have lifted the emergency declaration, they have put in place emergency act so that they can still continue as if in an emergency. Local municipalities will not have that ability to do that. We will either continue to be an emergency or cancel the emergency and not be able to operate within the emergency declaration.
Dr. Kittrus, follow on.
With the municipality of Mapleton has just announced that they're having in public, but they will be having it in a remote location. And I was wondering whether that would be a feasibility for Center Wellington also.
Yeah, that's a good question, Councillor Kittrus, and I do know that Mayor Davidson, I talked to Mayor Davidson about that, and they are going to be doing it in a large facility so that they can physically distance. The challenge that we have is that we're live streaming, and everything for live streaming is set up here. So right now, everybody can access our live stream, and to move that over, I don't think that it's feasible to move our live streaming apparatus over. So those are some of the discussions we're having. I, for one, would love to get together in person as fast as we can. This is really difficult. Zoom meetings, it's not easy to go through, and for all of us, I know it's not easy to go through this. So, it is something that as soon as we can safely move forward in a way that makes sense and is safe both from a council perspective and a public perspective, I'd love to see us back live. So those discussions are happening. They're also happening at the county level. We're going to have a discussion with the mayors on Wednesday. I just set it up this morning, and just to see what they're thinking about. And I'll ask Mayor Davidson from Mapleton how things are going and how he's doing what he's doing, because we are sharing best practices across the county. We're all struggling with the same thing. The challenge is we all have different facilities, and it makes it easier for some of us to do council in facilities, and there's nobody else that's live streaming the way we are, so that gives us a little bit of an advantage normally, but it gives us a challenge in going to bigger space. So we're going to have a discussion with the mayors to see if we can be as consistent as possible and see what others are doing. But your thoughts for all the councillors, if you can get back to me with your thoughts on this over the next couple of weeks and how you're feeling about getting together physically, say in September. I'd really like to hear from all of you about how you're feeling. This pandemic is having different impacts on everybody, and in addition to citizens being all over the map when it comes to what we should be doing and what we should not be doing. And I know that all of us probably have our own individual thoughts about how we should be meeting, and I'd like to hear them. So you guys could think about it and get back to me in the next bit about September, what you're thinking as we move forward to committee of the whole and council in September again, twice a month. Let me know how you're feeling about getting together and any thoughts that you have about how we do it safely. I'm all ears, and I know the staff here is all ears, because as soon as we can get back together physically, I think it helps the nature and the level of our discussion. Councilor Kitchens, follow on.
Thank you, Mayor, for that input, and so I will be sending you something. I'm wondering whether we're having a meeting in August and when that will be. That's for the CAO.
Yeah, in August, we have the August 24th council meeting. We do not have a pre-scheduled committee of the whole. So as per the calendar of agenda that council approved, I think it was back in November or December, there is a meeting for council. However, I do think we'll move it from the 7 p.m. to the 1 o'clock, as it will be still a Zoom meeting at that stage. So it's still August 24th.
Councilor Van Leeuwen?
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, no, I appreciate you soliciting our advice, and definitely will send an email to you as well as to how we feel about meeting. And I'd like to encourage you as you go to the county as well. The state of emergency is one of those things where it really puts all that discussion only between the mayors and the warden. And I'd really like to see that council here again has an opportunity when the state of emergency is over, that we have an opportunity to discuss the impacts of how some of the rules and laws that we make, and that comes back into the hands of council versus sitting in the state of emergency where the mayor, I know you as a warden as well, just make a rules and guidelines for everybody. So I'd like to see that encourage you that the state of emergency comes off sooner than later, and that council can again make those decisions together with a fulsome discussion. Thanks.
Any other items on the information items that you want to speak to, or including this one that we're talking about right now? Councilor Foster.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. My view is we've just proven through these last several Zoom meetings that the technology works well and that it's effective, and we've been able to meet electronically quite effectively, in my view, most of the time, and therefore it has to beg the question, why don't we then rescind the delegation now and get back to meeting, whether virtually or whether in the arena as they're doing in Mapleton. We could do this in Gordie Brown Hall, physically distanced, have a large horseshoe. I take your point, your worship, about live streaming, but given the unusual nature of a pandemic, I think we could set that aside, at least in the short term.
Also have accessibility
and meet. And that's my view. We ought to be meeting.
Microphones.
We could meet as we have in the past, and as the other 6 municipalities are able to do, because they don't do live streaming. It's a sacrifice we could make in the short term, at least, to meet.
Yeah, I appreciate your comments on that, Councilor Foster, and appreciate the comments of all members of council, because we really want to do whatever we have to do to feel like we're all engaged and making decisions as a body. Anything else on the information items here? Okay. Bylaws, 9.1 bylaws. I have a recommendation that bylaw 2020-33 be read a first, second, and third time and passed signed by the mayor and clerk, and the corporate seal of text. Move to that recommendation. Councillor Dunsmore, second by Councillor McCray. All in favor? And that's carried. Confirmatory bylaw recommendation that bylaw 2020-34 to confirm the proceedings of council as meeting held July 27th, 2020 be introduced for first, second, and third time and passed in open council. Mover for that recommendation. Councillor Kittrus, seconded by Councillor Dunsmore. All in favor? And that's carried. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Kittrus, seconded by Councillor Dunsmore. All in favor? And that is passed. Have a great rest of the afternoon and good evening, and we'll speak soon.